been quite the first 2 weeks of the year. Hope it's been a productive and a great looking one for you. Looking forward to the rest of the month and, of course, the rest of the year as well. But let's just try to live in the present and get ready to take a look at the stories making the headlines in the papers on Freshly Pressed. It's an interactive session as always. So we look forward to you to joining us to share your thoughts on the stories. Your reactions are very much appreciated. You can do that on WhatsApp by sending your messages to 0809 444 0981. 0809 444 0981. That is the WhatsApp number. You can also join us on YouTube, where we're streaming live at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Joining me on a Wednesday morning, as they usually do, Lakunle and Devoe are in the building, even though virtually, but still in the building. Very good morning to you, Lakunle.
Good morning, Ayo. And again, Happy New Year to our listeners. Some we have not spoken with since the year started. And January is 15th already. This January is different from the other Januaries. January used to be like 45 days. This one appears that it's going to be just 31 days.
Oh my goodness. Well, depending on where you're assisting, it could be 70 or 90 days, depending on where you're assisting. Devoe, very good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning, world. Good morning, Smooth. They were Lakunle. Ooh, New Year don't start.
Yes, sir. New Year don't start. We're back to life and we're back to reality. I can never get tired of quoting soul to soul. But anyways, let's begin to take a look at the stories this morning, Devoe. We're going to start in the, let me see here. We're going to start in the Vanguard. We're going to talk about power because the Minister of Power, Chief Adebayo Adelabu, has disclosed that the transmission company of Nigeria, that's a TCN, needs about 2.8 trillion naira to execute 149 projects to improve electricity transmission across the country. You know, he made this disclosure in separate appearances before power sector committees in the National Assembly to defend the Ministry of Power's 2025 budget proposal. Mr. Adelabu, Chief Adelabu, has been speaking a lot recently, and I recall he mentioned a couple of days ago or thereabouts talking about the grid collapses are not going to end anytime sooner. That's because of insecurity issues. But he has come out to say that they will still be happening, oh, yes, but we will try to make sure that the turnaround time is as reduced as possible. Now, talking about needing about 2.8 trillion naira to execute various projects to improve transmission of power across the country. Devoe, it looks like it's going to take quite a while yet before we get to El Dorado.
Well, unlike the song that was sung by Dr. Alban, we don't have the power. And unfortunately, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes. The power minister came in, as he said, he was happy to appear in front of the committee. Now, the funny thing here is that the 3 trillion he's asking for 150 projects is just for transmission alone. Obviously, we know that our transmission network, the grid, is obsolete. But I don't think they're going to give him that amount of money because the country does not have. And yes, what that means is that we're going to continue in the same way. Even when he mentioned that the presidential tax Siemens project will be second phase approved, it will only raise distribution from 4,000 to about 6,000 megawatts. Now, generally, with the grid collapse, it just simply means you're not going to get what they have promised. I would rather expect the power minister, and I'm hoping that the National Assembly would inquire of him of what will be done to get into strategic or international relationships to arrive at $10 billion for the Chinese to ramp up our grid to 20,000 megawatts. Literally, doing the same thing and expecting a different result is a waste of our time as a nation. You can't keep coming back every year, voting money into a pit hole that continues disappearing, and then we'll come back the next year again and ask for another 3 trillion.
Mm.
I'm just
Are you there, Devoe? Okay, he's back.
I hope the way they grill the finance minister, I hope they will grill the power minister in the same fashion, because his ministry contains the solution to 60% of our productivity. If they can
Indeed,
fix power,
a lot of things
literally
get fixed.
more than half of our problems would have been solved.
Most definitely, most definitely. And hopefully, I mean, like you said, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, that is the definition of what they like to say is insanity, really. You need to do things differently. And we know the solutions to these problems. We need to tackle things in a different way. But Nigeria, for some reason, we just love to do the same thing over and over. Maybe we love the sound of our voices. I don't know. I really can't explain at this point. But anyways, let's move away from power and talk about some agriculture, also having to do with voting of monies or approval of monies or not. Lakunle, let's talk about the Ministry of Livestock. We're taking this story out of The Guardian. Now, the National Assembly Joint Committee on Livestock Development has expressed concern over the 11.8 billion naira allocated for the Federal Ministry of Livestock Development in the 2025 budget, deeming it insufficient for the ministry's proper takeoff. Now, the committee has directed the Minister of Livestock Development, Mr. Idi Mahia, to prepare a supplementary budget that aligns with the ministry's financial needs. Luckily, is this a case of cart before horse? Because I mean, before talking about, this ministry, we're taking off, we need this and that. I mean, you already know, or you should have an idea of what it is that you need in terms of financing. Isn't this a case of not being fully prepared, or what could we say is happening here?
I looked at the story and I want to take it from maybe 2 or 3 different angles. Angle one is the idea that we needed a Ministry of Livestock separate from Ministry of Agric. There will be arguments for and against these statements, whichever one it is. The important thing to note is that we cannot run away from developing our agriculture, livestock, whatever.
Definitely.
As at the last statistics from the the old Ministry of Agriculture, right? Livestock alone contributes at 1.7% to the GDP. There are about 18.5 million cattle, 43.4 million heads of sheep. That's the type we kill for Salah. Then there's 76 million heads of goats, the red one, the black one, and so on and so forth. And about 180 million poultry in Nigeria. We are how many are we again? 200 million people. Ask ourselves, is this number, is it enough to feed Nigeria? Let's assume that we all have access to these items. Food inflation is at 34% officially. Some argue is higher than that and all that. Now, coming back to this story, 11.8 billion naira to start a ministry. For me, I do not believe that agriculture should be a primary responsibility at the federal level. I think that agriculture should be a primary responsibility at the local government level and at the worst at the state government level. Because one, the governor is the landlord. The governor is one that can assign land. The federal government can't come to Lagos to say that land, I want to use it for agriculture. Let's look at what I'm going to make example of 2 states. Let's look at what Lagos State has been doing in the last 4 years, 6 years or thereabouts in terms of agriculture. The Commissioner for Agriculture in Lagos, one can tell, is very intentional about agriculture. In Lagos alone today, the Commissioner says they slaughter about 10,000 heads of cows a day, right? So
6,000.
Is it 6,000 or 10,000? The last one I had her say was 10,000.
6,000.
Okay, let's say 6,000. which means that let's average that across all the other states. Say other states kill 3,000 each. Let's look at those numbers. Is this number commensurate with the effort the federal government we expect, or the focus we're putting on the federal government to do? That is angle 2. Then the third angle that I'm looking at this story from then is, okay, so we have this money. Capital expenditure is taking about 97% of the money. And we have, let me look at this exact number to make it sync properly. 11.8 billion is allocated to Ministry of Livestock, right? And they say that only 1.8 billion is for overhead costs. Overhead costs for what? Is it salaries? We know that salary is already taken care of at IP's level. So what is this overhead costs? 10 billion for capital expenditure. What capital expenditure? To build offices, to buy printer, to buy computer, or what? What is the capital expenditure that we're talking about here? So let's assume then that agriculture, we are assuming to be a primary focus of the federal government. Is this enough to sustain that 180 million heads of cattle that we just spoke about, or to provide something similar to the ranch that Borno State government just launched, I think at the beginning of the week, this week or late last week, that made the news that Borno State government started a ranch to resettle about 41 or some number of displaced headers. So when you look at all of this and you put them together, you can begin to wonder how prepared. Well, we've had about, when this ministry was announced was pretty much earlier in 2024, I think around March, or was it anniversary of the first anniversary of what's it called, of the current administration, that it was announced that ministry. So we've had minimum of 7 months to plan. And of all the plans that ministry has made, this is the result of what we get. And they are needing a Senate to tell them that the money you have written is not enough to even start your ministry. Okay? So when we put all of these three together, it doesn't appear to me that we're serious about how our agriculture. Don't forget, the first thing that a nation that can feed itself is perhaps the most secured nation anywhere in the world. Look at Ukraine. Ukraine has been at war for how long? But they are still the world leading producer of wheat. How have they done it? What are they doing different that we're not doing, that we cannot copy from in terms of things like this? We speak a lot of English about these things. We're not putting a lot of anything on ground to suggest that we want to walk the talk.
Right.
Lakunle, are you saying there will be no beef in 2025?
I am not saying so. I am worried that the inflation that we're talking about might get worse if we have you know what they say about eating protein these days, right? That we've been proving over time. And if let's assume all of us have access to it, how long will our 80 million heads of cow last if Lagos alone kills 6,000 daily?
These are the questions. Well, I definitely need to have my beef in 2025. Protein, very, very important for we growing people. Anyways, let's switch gears a little bit here and talk about one of the issues that has been plaguing the agricultural sector, and that has to do with insecurity. Devoe, let's head into the vanguard here. Now, the Minister of Defense, Mr. Mohammed Abubakar, has requested the House of Reps to provide an additional 50 armored personnel carriers, APCs, in the 2025 budget to flush out bandits in the country. Now, he made the request on Tuesday at the 2025 budget defense session organized by the House Committee on Defense in Abuja, and said with the equipment, the fight against banditry in the country would be over in 2 months. Now, that's a very bold assertion for anyone to actually make. Now, he said out of what we had in 2024, we were only able to provide just 20 armored personnel carriers, but what can 20 APCs actually do? If we're able to have 50 APCs that can go into the bush to flush out those criminals, I assure you, within 2 months, we will finish the issue of banditry, but there is no provision for that in the 2025 budget. We've been on this issue of insecurity and banditry for years, and years. Now, he's saying that if they provide 50 APCs within 2 months, they will flush out all the bandits and end this. That is, like I said, a very bold assertion for anyone to make, let alone the Minister of Defense.
Yes. Is it the same Ministry of Defense that promised us that once they have the Apache and Tucano helicopters, that they will flush out banditry? Is it not the same Ministry of Defense?
That was 2022, if I remember.
Yes, we bought the Tucano planes, helicopters, and yet banditry still exists. First of all, it's very rich of the Ministry of Defense to be asking for more capital equipment. Not that they don't have it, but the truth is, this banditry and insurgency is not 100% kinetic. It is almost 60% non-kinetic. They've said it to us 100 times. What they need more money for is for intelligence and surveillance, so that they can actually nip banditry at the bud. And if I were the National Assembly, already 500 billion was allocated to the military, which they've been getting year on year. At this time, I expect us to make a shift and allocate some bulk funds to the police. One of the reasons why we have what they call ungoverned spaces is because you have areas that between one police station and the next is about 2 to 3 hours. When you have states like that, especially in the north, it gives criminals, bandits, the insurgents opportunities to reign and to do what they like amongst villages that have no protection. This is the reality and the truth about our situation. I think the security architecture needs to be addressed. It's not just about buying high intensive equipment that at the end of the day does not resolve the issue on ground. You just heard how a raid by the Air Force killed about 15 people that were innocent. Of course, there'll always be collateral damage, but a permanent solution is to have boots on the ground, starting with the police. If the police are geared up in numbers, ramp them from 250 to about 1 million, I think we will be able to have a firm hold on insecurity, especially scattered around the nation. Enough of just using the military to be pumping money out and we get no results.
Most definitely. Thank you for sharing those thoughts, Lakunle. Sorry, I thought Devoe, I beg your pardon. Zeman from Bristol on WhatsApp says, good morning to you too. Are we talking about the same Minister of State? Not Minister of State for Defense, it's Minister of Defense. It's Mr. Mohammed Abubakar, not Bello Matawale that we're talking about. So just to clarify that one, Zeman was asking if it's Bello Matawale. Nope, it's the actual Minister of Defense that we are referring to in this particular instance. All right, Lakunle, let's jump back in to the Punch newspaper. Let's talk about the CBN. Now they have sanctioned 9 deposit money banks with fines totaling about 1.35 billion naira for failing to ensure cash availability via the automated teller machines, the ATMs, during the festive season. Now each of the banks was fined 150 million following spot checks that revealed non-compliance with the Apex Bank's cash distribution guidelines. Lakunle, I remember a couple of weeks ago, you were right here in this studio, and we're talking about this issue of the cash scarcity. And I can't remember specifically what the story was then, but it had to do with this. Now, the CBN has wielded the heavy hammer on these banks, 9 of them, 150 million naira each. And we've talked about this issue of cash not being available at ATMs, where the POS operators are king, and how it has been such an issue in the country. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so let me start from this. The good news is that through the CBN, the federal government of Nigeria is 1.3 billion naira richer. At least this money should go to the CRF, and I'm thinking, if I'm correct, will be part of the money that will be shared at the next FAC. The bad news then, therefore, is that to all of those of us who are shareholders in all these banks, the potential profit to be declared, dividend to be declared, has reduced by 1.35 billion naira. So that's on the surface of it. I recall the last time we spoke about this, one of the comments that we highlighted was that if you go to certain places in Lagos today, this morning, you would see people holding newly minted Naira notes
Right.
with POS machines, hawking the Naira notes openly in the open. That's not even the ones that come to your parties on weekends. I'm saying on a regular Monday to Friday, you would see them openly hawking the Naira notes. Someone said on social media a few days ago that it was offered, is it 50,000 Naira at 85,000 Naira? That means that to get 50,000 Naira new notes, you will pay a premium of 35,000 Naira at a party. How, whether it is true or not, but we know how this thing goes, right? So it means that there are some people profiting from this anomaly. For it to exist this way, for us to see it openly the way we see it, for it to be as big as we talk about it, that we go to teller machines and we don't see money. Okay, so I think that the fine maybe is a good place to start. But maybe if the CBN goes a step further and says to a bank that if I have maybe say 10 or 15 or 20 or 100 reports of no cash in any of your teller machines in minimum of 5 or 10 states in a week or in a month, I will sack the MD of that bank. Or something very drastic needs to be done now. The idea of the POS business is not supposed to take the cash away from our hands entirely. It's supposed to provide last mile access to cash, meaning that my grandfather, my mother, my uncle in the village where there are no banks, right? People like that can have access to cash. I can send money to them from the city where I am, and I am sure they would get it. Or that they can send money to me or to my bank account from there. That's the idea of the thing. But here we are. Everybody can walk into any bank today and acquire a POS machine and set up a kiosk at this roadside and start to charge people. So you do 5,000 Naira. The law says that you're supposed to charge 50 Naira. Those people are charging 200 Naira today. We have a penchant for flouting the rules and looking for loopholes in our laws to make life difficult for ourselves. And that is what this is all about. Imagine all the money the banks have spent in acquiring the teller machines. Imagine how much they've spent to install them. Imagine how much they drive all of us that want to collect 5,000 Naira over the counter to go to the machines. Even the banks. So when you put all of this together, you're asking yourself, this business is big, it is visible. Right. If all these are what it is, there is a fine enough. I think we should go a step further, something more drastic than just a fine, to at least try to address this thing.
Very, very important. That is dealt with. Like you mentioned, Lakunle, the POS operators having all this money left, right, and center. Where exactly is it coming from? And definitely someone is benefiting from this particular setup. Until that is cut off, or until that is actually dealt with, we probably are not going to solve this problem by any stretch of the imagination. Fatima in VI on WhatsApp says, CBN is only dipping their hands into the pockets of banks because they can. The POS operators are a monster created by the CBN, and they can no longer control them. How does it profit a bank to not pay its customers? Very, very big question.
I just wanted to add.
All right, Devoe. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that this problem was always going to happen because it's still a cash economy. What the CBN needs to do is strengthen the alternative options, like the electronic methods. If they can build resilient electronic means, what will happen is that less people will use cash. But as long as it's a cash economy, people are always cashing out. And as long as they're cashing out, there will always be a higher demand to buy cash than to put it back into the bank.
Right.
But you see, Devoe,
we have so many electronic means of doing cash business today.
They're
But
not
guess what?
100%. They're not
Yes,
100%
I
effective.
agree with you. But you see, the problem is that the places where we need to spend money the most, those are the places where majority of people in that ecosystem they are resistant to the use of these electronic means. They still prefer their cash. That is the problem that we need to resolve.
All right, Tony from Marine Beach says, that's beautiful analysis, Devoe. Nigeria is indeed under-policed. More funds to policing and better surveillance systems. And if the military can get rid of the moles within them, and the presidency touching the untouchable list of terrorism sponsors gotten from free intel by the UAE and fully restructure the country, with these, we're done with anything terrorism in our land. From your mouth to the ears of the Lord. Ajayi Olunilua says, the request for about 3 trillion naira by the power minister to fix transmission issues is another wild goose chase. If so much is required for transmission issues, how much will be required to generate enough power? God help us. Indeed, God help us big time. All right, Devoe, let's jump back in here and let's quickly talk about Governor Hope Uzodinma of Imo State. He has been making a couple of comments. This is Governor of the Vanguard. And he has declared that state governments are currently getting more funds under the President Bola Tinubu's administration. Yes, we've heard that. Now, he said the fuel subsidy removal is responsible for this current development. I'm not sure. Now, speaking during the inspection of some projects to celebrate the first year of his second term on Monday, the governor said the fuel subsidy removal is a blessing to state governments. Now, I know you've spoken about this many times, talking about how we need to put more focus on state governments and the local governments. Yes, the federal has their issues, but the state governments also. Now, Governor Uzodinma of Imo State speaking here, talking about there's more money at hand. But then the question that you need to ask is, yes, there's more money, but what exactly has the money done? What has it been used for? Has it been properly utilized? And having more money and it not being able to do what it's supposed to do, is there any point to it, really?
Yes. So Governor Hope Uzodinma has talked about when they asked during the National Assembly grilling of the finance minister that where is the money that came from removal of subsidy, he called for a closed-door session. Likewise, at the state level, Governor Uzodinma cannot mark his own exam. I want to hear from the residents of Imo State whether they've seen improved projects and infrastructure before I agree to what he's saying. No governor will be the one to tell you how well he has spent his own funds. It is the people living in the states that will tell you whether they have seen a difference or not.
Very, very important. Thank you for sharing that, Devoe. Let's excuse me. Let's take a couple of messages. They've lined up and time has absolutely flown by. Michael says, in new ministry, this is another means of squandering taxpayers' blood and sweat. We hear about the silly amounts proposed 2x6 computers and other such things. Nobody has been jailed for corruption or stealing, embezzlement as well. I dare say that just jailing them will lower inflation in this country. Solve the security problems first, please. After all, there were no issues with production before terrorism. Okay. Oluwaseyi says, not only APCs, now NCNC, AG, LP, MBA, and so on. You mean the APCs, they've been donating with the weapons on them to terrorists and bandits everywhere across the northern part of the country? The defense ministry is now some person's cash cow, which is always the way when a war or conflict goes on long enough. But in a place like Nigeria, where people steal public wealth without shame because it's now a mental illness, I can't begin to imagine the percentage being stolen from that defense ministry. Okay, Bimbo in VI says, the cash problem is a supply issue. Let the CBN meet the supply and all this will go away. I mean, Bimbo, I hear you, but like we said, we see cash with these POS operators, a lot of cash with these POS operators. So I'm trying to understand, how we say it's a supply problem, but we see a lot of the money with a certain group of people and not with the banks as well. I mean, if there was no money in the banks and POS operators, yes, I get it. But we have money with the POS operators. So, Devoe, do you need to mute or Lakunle, you need to mute. Devoe, could you please mute on your end? All right. Sam from Ikeja says, the fault is not entirely on the banks, but the same CBN. CBN gives banks limited cash, hence the banks rationalize the cash also. 70% is put in the ATMs, and PS operators go to the ATMs to withdraw this cash multiple times with different cards. So the CBN cannot use the sledgehammer always when they are also culprits. All right. Fabian from Epe says, the attitude of the banks is really appalling. From being forced to get ATM cards to the states now where a legitimate customer cannot get funds beyond 5,000 to 10,000 naira from the bank or the ATMs, but can cross the bank to a POS operator and get 100,000 naira of his own money for a fee. Even the electronic means fails frequently during the weekend and leaves people stranded. It's completely unfair and may lead people to no longer trust the banks, but rather to hoard their money. Ibrahim Zakari says, Nigeria defies all basic laws of economics. If Nigeria is explained to you and you comprehend, it certainly wasn't explained properly. Okay. Gilbert Musa says, on the proposed investments in the power sector, let us cast our minds back to August 2004, when the federal government awarded over 19 power contracts valued at about 25 billion naira for construction of transmission lines and substations across the country. What is the way forward now? As I love to say, so many questions and not enough answers. Okay. And fine, I think Ebon says the supply is coming from businesses directly to POS and no longer the banks. All right. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us this morning. And of course, big thank you to you, Devoe and Lakunle, for taking the time out to join me on a Wednesday morning.
Thank you, Ayo, for having me. It's been like I said, January is quite quick. By this time next week, we'll be counting down on the month. See you on the other side.
All right. Devoe.
Oh yeah, come now.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much once again. And keep it tuned to Smooth 98.1, 8:15. We'll get into the world of sports in the locker room. Will I say Devoe did full jungle right now?